I wanted to give a quick shout out to the Alaskans because Russia is coming over, swaddling in with Mr. Vladimir Putin, wanted by international courts, and in many countries he would be arrested right as he walked off the tarmac. And we're going to watch that video in a second, but it's not just a question of, oh, you know, Putin's come to the United States. There is a lot of fanfare attached to this. There is a lot of performance being made for the cameras. This is something that Trump, you know, obviously quite likes. We'll watch in a second the video of him walking out, talking, shaking hands, the little scuffle with reporters, which I thought was interesting, and what was attached to that. But in Alaska, there was quite a lot of people in Anchorage protesting against the Russian president being here. People are asking for him to be arrested, people flying Ukrainian flags, people are calling out Russian war crimes. And this wasn't just something done by, of course, these protesters on the ground, but there were some instances with journalists that I want to point out on multiple occasions that did elicit responses from the Russian president, who did not seem particularly interested in engaging with war crime accusations. First, let's start with the fanfare, because the press conference should be starting anytime now, and I want to get through the fanfare. Here is Russian President Vladimir Putin and American President Donald Trump getting off the planes, meeting on the tarmacs, walking down the red carpet, and shaking hands.
Here we go, Andrew.
Here we go.
So we are now seeing President Trump come down the steps here, and it looks like moments away from President Putin. We are going to keep an eye on this. I just want to go out full right now. I'll keep an eye on the other shot here, but we want to take out full right now. President Trump coming down the steps of Air Force One, and really the pressure that must be mounting on his shoulders, not only for the U.S. side, but really for the representation of
Kyle
Ukraine.
Parker gave Jeb Bush a Tier 1 subscription.
Not only for the U.S. side, but really for the representation of Ukraine as well, coming down and trying to get some sort of deal done, or even just the working. So now here we go of President Putin coming down as well. Let's show you the side-by-side right now, Andrew.
Speaking of Jeb Bush, you think Jeb Bush would have done this with Vladimir Putin? You know, you can say a lot of things about Jeb Bush, but I don't think a member of the Bush family would have.
What a moment right here.
And he's now subscribed to my channel.
The two leaders coming, President Trump now coming near that red carpet right now, and on the other side we have President Putin coming down his red carpet.
Now, to be clear, when they say his red carpet, I do mean a red carpet. They do mean a red carpet for him explicitly, that was rolled out by American soldiers that had to go out there and roll out this red carpet for the Russian president.
Fake Alec Kyle Parker gave XL a Tier 1 subscription.
As well, and flanked by...
Man, thank you, Kyle. You're going off today. But this is what I mean by credibility being added to the Russian president, this removal of isolation by doing this event. Even if we didn't have all this fanfare, this image of Russia's international isolation and the goal of the Russian government to destroy that image, that they're isolated, that they've done something so horrible that until they stop, you know, the world is gonna like treat them differently. He wants to smash that image. And I knew just by having this summit, especially by having a summit in the United States with no concrete, you know, commitments in advance, was going to have that effect.
Burns is an immoral,
morally corrupt, bankrupt man. Thank you for the support, son of a cod. A 60-month sub. Man, my goodness, you've been here for a while. So I knew that I knew that it was already going to break some image of international isolation. But then when you do it in the United States, and then you do it with all the fanfare, having U.S. soldiers literally roll out the red carpet for him, as if what's going to like be the difference maker here is how well we treat the Russian president. Now, this isn't like particularly egregious. If we're going to have a big state visit, you know, you try to at least like bring them into the United States. But Trump is one for the dramatic. And again, this is why having this meeting in person without commitments for ceasefires, XYZ, in advance was always going to give them a net gain, irrespective of whether we have a good result on these negotiations, or feeling out, as the American president redefined it as.
His security team, what would be his Secret Service for Russia, now coming. And let's go now back out to President Trump as well, making his way and alone right now as he's stepping forward.
The greetings.
Ultimately, they will come down near this side and meet at the center of the tarmac right now.
So I have to wonder, when they're doing these types of events and they're planning this out, what amount of this is Trump doing for the cameras, and what amount of this is he doing because he thinks it's going to give him a diplomatic edge? I know that Trump thinks himself as a great negotiator, thinks of himself as, like, you know, the art of the deal guy. So I'm sure that he has some, like, you know, some diplomatic tricks. I'm not of the belief that Trump is just like a complete bumbling buffoon and he doesn't think about anything. It's just maybe I don't necessarily think that the tricks that he uses has been quite successful. One example I wanted to point to, before, you know, we'll talk about that in a second. Here's the big moment. All smiles. So then they walk together for a bit, and then they come over to the press. But as he was walking up, and as I was talking, this is actually a perfect time for me to talk about, you know, these things that I don't know are for, you know, are for the press, or whether they're for diplomatic purposes, or what Trump tricks he has. You can see in this frame that Putin looks to his left at something off camera. Off camera, some jets come overhead, including a B-2 stealth bomber, and fly immediately over the red carpet that they're walking down.
This is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you so much for the primer, Evil City. Number one, how many problems could that B-2 stealth bomber have solved? Number two, what was the purpose of this? Is this to show off for the cameras, which I think Trump likes to make himself look big? Of course, he's the big military parade guy. He likes the chest banging. He thinks it's good for the country. He thinks definitely it's good for his image. Probably. But I also think that there could be an element here where Trump thinks that these types of display of power with somebody like Vladimir Putin, which, I mean, there is some sense to it, with it being Vladimir Putin, somebody who, you know, ultimately does respect hard power, but he thinks that these types of displays of power will maybe make the Russian president more willing to negotiate, that he immediately walks off the tarmac, and what's the first thing he sees? American B-2 stealth bombers, reminders of American power, reminders of American innovation, reminders of American global air dominance. There is no country on the planet that has an air force like ours, even though, of course, the gap between air forces do not stay ever present. We're still, like, the biggest air force in the world is the United States. You want to know what the second one is? The United States Navy. It's quite baffling, actually, when you think about how much power we invest in air power. So it could be this is and it's actually not baffling. There's a reason why. It's, you know, we want to have, like, global coverage. We want to be able to respond anywhere at a moment's notice. But it's baffling just at the scale of it. Anyway, I think that there could be some diplomatic signaling here that is going on. So after they do that, they shake hands, they, you know, get a little friendly. Putin then stands at the end of the tarmac, talks to Trump, and some journalists start asking questions. Now, they didn't get any full responses from Putin or Trump. They didn't come over and answer actually a single journalist question the entirety of this event. Which is why this press scrum, which is happening now, so we're going to get over to it in a second, is so important. And we're going to see if he answers any questions, Putin likes to kind of show off his intelligence with his, his arranged, choreographed interviews in Russia. It's kind of harder to organize that here unless the American government wants to organize it that way. But in this instance, he's asked, hey, what about all the civilians that are being killed? Will Russia stop killing civilians? And he responds by pretending he didn't hear the question or understand it. He speaks perfect English.
Mr. Putin, did you underestimate Ukraine? President Putin, will you stop killing civilians?
Now, this meeting that just occurred, and we're going to watch the press conference in a second, originally was supposed to be a one-on-one between Trump and Putin, and that was something that gave me a lot of concern because I thought that Trump isolated in a room with somebody like Putin, he would not have all the tools or the knowledge necessary to navigate that conversation. But then Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio joined Trump's team in that meeting. And on Putin's side, eventually it ended up being Sergei Lavrov and Kirill Dmitriev, who actually, Kirill Dmitriev, I mean, most people know Sergei Lavrov. He's the Russian foreign minister. Kirill Dmitriev has been a special envoy to the United States since Trump's first term. So he's very familiar with working with American officials. He's going to have a certain amount of knowledge. And there's two clips I thought were interesting, but from both Sergei Lavrov, who was on Putin's side, and Kirill Dmitriev that I wanted to show quickly. Is this it? No. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Sergei Lavrov actually came to the summit wearing a USSR sweatshirt. The Russians ever happy with their symbology, ever happy with the flag waving, but most happy with the historical references. My goodness, every Russian political leader would have been a top mod on a lot of history subreddits. Not good mods, mind you, but mods. The other one, Kirill Dmitriev, actually wandered an Alaskan forest. And he actually published a video of encountering with local wildlife, like, oh, look at the pretty deer, pretty there. And I just had to ask, there's a lot of beautiful bears in the forest in Alaska. Anyway, so Kirill Dmitriev, Sergei Lavrov, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Keith Kellogg, and Donald Trump. Keith Kellogg being the one probably on the American side with the most knowledge, definitely is one who can speak Russian and does have some a decent amount of knowledge about the Russians, even if I don't particularly see eye to eye with Keith Kellogg. And then Marco Rubio, who has served on a lot of foreign policy committees, foreign affairs committees, and is particularly, at least, informed compared to other people in Trump world, if not as informed as someone might want him to be. So that's what they go into this meeting like. They have a picture for the cameras before going into the meeting. Trump is all smiles. Putin looks like he could honestly be doing anything else. I don't know if he is particularly having fun here, or he's just trying to keep a straight face of what the thing is. And here also the press tried to interrogate Putin, and the press was not allowed to ask him a single question. The staff at the White House shut it all down and hurried them out. But you can even see on Putin's face, like, he seems almost like confused. Like, do you really think you can ask me that?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, press. 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 Let's go. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's go. Thank you, press. Let's go.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Let's go.
So you can hear actually the audio much better about the questions being asked from a C-SPAN reporter, which was closer. But they weren't allowed to ask any questions beforehand. That was all, again, pushed off. And we're going to hopefully see in this press scrum some real questions being asked then. But at this point, like, Trump is just, up until that meeting, basically keeping Putin away from the press entirely. And Putin himself seems completely not interested in engaging, obviously, with the way he's reacting. So, are you guys ready for the press conference? I think we'll do the press conference now. There is some other things I wanted to go to, but since it started, I think we got to get through this. Okay, you guys ready? Here it is.
Уважаемый господин президент, дамы и господа, наши переговоры прошли в конструктивной и взаимоуважительной атмосфере.
Yay, it's in
Были
Russian.
весьма обстоятельными и полезными.
This is all
Хотел
gonna be
бы
in Russian?
еще у нас одни корни, и все происходит корни, и все
Completely untranslated Russian. Okay, fantastic. Let me just tell you, he's in the United States choosing to speak Russian. He speaks English. He's just chosen to come to Anchorage, Alaska and do it in Russian. So he could have done it in a way that would have been easier to communicate with the American people. They start translating later. What do you mean? Reuters starts translating, or who starts translating?
где можно буквально перешагнуть из
I think maybe a different outlet starts translating, but not this. I think DW usually translates, and they're an international news channel. I think they'll probably have a translator for it, or at least ready.
Alaska.
Yes, they do. Thank you, DW.
Уважаемый господин президент,
Mr. President,
дамы и господа,
ladies and gentlemen,
наши переговоры
our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We had very thorough negotiations. They were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, good afternoon, dear neighbor, very good to see you, in good health, and to see you alive. I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the U.S. island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are 2 flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well, there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later, we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue, naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work. And this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And special envoy of the president, Mr. Woodcock, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand its history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us, a terrible wound. Therefore, the country
Why did you make me do this?
Sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that.
The security of Ukraine must be ensured as well. Naturally, we're willing to work on that. But then they previously say our security stuff must be attended to. And since the first days of the war, one of their big demands was you must disarm militarily. How can you guarantee Ukraine's security while also the Russians still believing that Ukraine's empowerment in any fashion, especially if they were included to go even further with some like multilateral defense organization, how can you do these two things at the same time? That is the fundamental problem with this conference right now, or really any deal, is that these two things are completely opposed to each other.
I'd like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings and to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress.
What progress? Trump said this is a feeling out meeting after 5 phone calls that didn't go anywhere. What nascent progress? Nascent progress still implies progress. We've gotten nowhere. The only ceasefires that have been negotiated were immediately violated, like the civilian one. So, like, what progress has been guarded? The fact that he stepped on our soil? Like, there's nothing to torpedo. That's the sad truth. I wish there was something there. There's just nothing there to torpedo.
Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started.
Dylan, stop this. Okay. Putin, cease. We'll see if it works.
To grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible. And our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, at the border between Russia and the U.S., there is a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope that we'll succeed in that. in political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about the prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake.
What's interesting in a way that Putin and Trump can align themselves is Putin can both flatter Trump by blaming everything on the previous administration, which also still blames the United States because there's a continuance of governments. And so Putin both gets to flatter Trump by going after Biden and blaming him, while also removing any of the blame from himself and placing it at the feet of the United States. But because it's politically partisan, it's not going to get him any flack, at least from Trump.
Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
You think Trump will ever stop mentioning that? Putin confirmed it. He would have invaded if I was president. He said so. Would he lie? Why would he lie about that at the conference to make me feel good? Why would he lie and say I would have fixed everything? Maybe it's true.
Mr. President, that was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite got there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about...
Okay. I haven't watched all of this. I'm just saying this now. He said we've made headway, but we still got big things to work on, XYZ. If he does not mention what headway was made in any capacity, and that isn't able to be interrogated, it doesn't list it, and it cannot be publicly discussed. Trump has been talking about progress in the talks for 7 months now. So if we end this presser with no answer as to what progress has been made, it's like, oh, we got Putin to agree that he is going to do even larger prisoner swaps. That doesn't even get us anywhere closer to peace. At least that's something, though. Oh, we got Putin to agree that the children will be returned. Like the Ukrainian children would be returned to Ukraine that were illegally deported, or at least given to a third-party country so an international body of some sort could adjudicate it, which is how it's supposed to work in war, by the way, in treaties that Russia themselves have signed. So this would just be Russia adhering to the standards themselves they had agreed to, because they had wanted other states to treat them with that same standard. Until they list something that is some progress, then it is nothing more than a feeling out process that like he said, that when he eventually died it down, and we're at the lower end of the spectrum on expectations. So until he lists the thing, I'm just expecting it's a hype job. And I'm sorry if that's just me coming in with some amount of bias, but Trump has like a proven record.
Today's meeting, it's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this.
Does Trump have a cold? He does. He's not projecting his voice as usual. I mean, I know he has ebbs and flows, and when you're pushing 80 years old with president's schedule, even with all the golfing, you know, you're gonna have good days, you're gonna have bad days. But it's almost sounds like he's got a cold or something. He's got a cold or something.
It's over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened.
We're talking about the 2016 Russian interference in the election, which, again, any reference back to that Helsinki meeting, definitely in this context, just pumps me full of anxiety. But come on, you have a certain amount of time to talk to the press. But Trump is always... He could be saying, like, hey, we're going to work on XYZ issue. These are the things we still have to talk about. Anything but this.
But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to.
Extremely productive. Okay, that's even better than what he said before. Then there should be anything he could list. It should be easy. If it's extremely productive, my God, peace at our times. Extremely productive. I'm sorry, it's hard, man. It's hard to take this seriously sometimes when Trump so quickly just hypes things up and then under-delivers.
There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President...
Why not just name the thing? One is significant, one is not that significant. Just name, like, we still need to work on, like, why not say we still need to work on demarcation of the border, or we still need to work on the Ukrainian children. We still need to work. If you don't name anything, then you're just saying progress. I mean, you said that if this was successful, there was going to be a second one with Zelensky there. Is that going to happen?
Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, otherwise, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you.
So he had time for the Russia hoax, and he had time to compliment the fame of many of the Russian attendees of the summit, but he did not have time to mention any of the specifics. Okay. So again, how am I supposed to treat this than anything else then? I mean, they could have, what happened here that's different than what happened on the phone the 5 times before when he's talked to Putin since he's been inaugurated? Not even talking about any conversations that could have happened before then.
Very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Mind you, the next meeting, he said Zelensky was going to be there. Next time in Moscow. Oh, that could happen. So is Zelensky going to Moscow? Or is it just like, ha 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 ha, like you were gonna come to, you were not really gonna do that? Because he said, oh, I might get some heat for that, but maybe, like, it's hard to take Trump. You know, Trump just kind of like ebbs and flows. You know, he grabs onto something and he's slippery. He'll slip away from it like in a second. I think one of the best examples was that TikTok ban after that meeting with that very, we'll just say wealthy individual with interest in TikTok.
And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is occurred.
And that's that. And that's it. Thank you for the £2. I appreciate that. As far as I'm concerned, the USA is a Russian oblast now. I mean, this is pretty bad. So Putin ignores the questions from the press on the tarmac. They ignore the questions from the press during the period before the meeting, and they don't take a single question from the press in the period after the meeting. And we don't get any specifics about what was even talked about in detail that they made progress on when they talk about progress. To be quite frank, I mean, we don't even know exactly what went down in that meeting besides what they said here, which was just that progress was made, and then we made extreme progress, made tons of progress. So you just really have to take Trump at his word that unlike the last 6 to 7 months, and unlike the last 5 phone calls with Vladimir Putin, this sit-down meeting that took roughly 2 hours, which he did not walk out on, and he said that if it went badly, he'd walk out on it. So he stayed in it, says it goes good, comes out of it, says there's progress, goes further, says there's extreme progress, but we have nothing to look at. And then towards the end of it, like, I mean, there's nothing of note in the width of it, really. It's Putin, Reddit history posting like he loves to do. For a half second, I got a Tucker Carlson interview flashback. I was right back down in the media trenches. And then Donald Trump said, Russia, Russia, Russia hoax, commented on some people in the audience. So, I mean, you have nothing to go off of besides Trump's word.
Do you think Trump compared Putin to Luffy and asked if there's KFCs in Russia?
Thank you for the $5. I appreciate that. Thank you. Dylan, why are you against progress? I'm just a conservative man in modern America trying to make sense of it all. Look, I knew this was gonna probably not be that eventful. I knew it immediately from when Steve Witkoff started opening his fat mouth. And of course, Steve Witkoff got a shout out here. No time to talk about the details, all the time to give Steve Witkoff a shout out. When he told the Europeans in the eve of setting up all of this summit that they only did in a week, which is another reason why this had a low chance of success, that it was only put together in a week. And in some ways, actually, I think ended up being a little humorous. For example, there was actually Russian journalists who came and started complaining because all they got to eat was some, according to Simeon, of course, the Russian state lackey, also being assigned for the night to what appears to be a disaster evacuation zone. Russian journalists were treated to breakfast of tuna mayo left out overnight, some chips, and an unlimited supply of water. Parentheses, from a drinking fountain, parentheses, the sacrifices of last-minute diplomacy. While the fact that they're getting details like from the Russians, they say the meeting went well, but this is the type of stuff that's being focused on. Like, we're not getting any details at this point. And so all we know is that Trump and Putin both says that it goes well, that they made progress. Well, Trump said that the progress was made, but when it comes to the substance of what was said, the only thing that was substantively said or attended to when it comes to the war was Putin saying we still need to address our security issues and the foundations of the conflict, while also then going on to talk about, like, very briefly, like, we understand that, Ukraine, may need like some amount of security, XYZ. But the thing is, as long as his demands are still like Ukraine's demilitarization, like these two things, Russian war aims and Ukraine security, are just not going to see eye to eye. Same with the capture and annexation of their most defensible military positions. Not offensible, by the way, if you're talking about Russia security. Okay, it's not that Kramatorsk is particularly useful for invading into Russia. It's just defendable. And it's easier for Russia to take the villages in between these large settlements instead. So it'd be easier to negotiate it into the control and negotiate a Ukrainian withdrawal, which is what I am almost certain was pushed in this meeting and what previous media reports indicated was pushed in this meeting, than it is to capture it by force. And so the Russians are not only aiming to use diplomacy as a way to delay action, which means that their engagement in of itself is assisting them. It's assisting them in removing pressure from themselves, but they are trying to use it to achieve military objectives, the captures of cities, the capture of settlements without a fight. And if they can get Trump to see their
Burns
way,
is an immoral,
then
morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
not only maybe could they get him to pressure the Ukrainians to do that, if the Ukrainians say no, which they will likely do, then maybe that could lead to more aid cuts. Maybe that can lead to more division in the West. Maybe that could lead to divides in the transatlantic relationship. And the less the United States is doing technology transfers or training operations or intelligence sharing or is in a good warm place with Five Eyes or NATO, the better the Russian government feels about Russia's national security interests, quote unquote, so to speak. So at this point, I can't really comment on progress on this meeting. I can comment that the press didn't get a swing. Putin got all the fanfare he wanted. And all we have been told is that the meeting went well with no details as to what was actually discussed. I'm hoping that we get some more information in the near future, but what's the point of a presser? What's the point of even having a presser? What's the point of having the press gather and cameras gather if you're not going to let them ask questions and you're going to tell them stuff you could have Googled off of Wikipedia? Did you know Alaska used to be part of Russia? Whoa! Did you know that Russia and America once fought Hitler? Whoa! Ignore 3941. Those are years that don't. But did you know they fought Hitler? Whoa! And this is.
This is occurred.
Quite painful. It's painful to have to try to derive information so I would rather just know if we're in the garbage, if we're in the dumps, if he's about to make a bad deal, than just like this endless delays of progress, any day now, you'll see Trump's endless ability to roll and bowl. He'd be a fantastic bowler, really. I mean, he could just keep it on rolling forever. And he's going to keep this can kicking down the road until he is made to stop kicking it down the road, either by public backlash, the Senate, or he actually just completely derails any and all support for Ukraine and tries to pull the plug. I don't think any historical back scratching is going to do the trick. And I don't think that without the conditions changing and without Trump showing them that he's serious, that this was never going to have success. This is the problem.
Occurred is occurred.
Oh, thank you for the $20. Thank you for the $20. They said, bit a minute, but keep it up, man. Disappointing meeting, but ultimately not surprising. Any updates on that breakthrough? We do have some updates. We'll talk about it in a second. I heard they cut off some troops and may have turned it around somewhat. Yes. Azov was kind of transferred into the area, and there was some stuff being reported that there could be some cutoff, but we don't know for sure. We're gonna have to wait for confirmation. We're gonna have to wait for photographs or video. Thank you for the $20, Sean. Thank you. And for that, somebody dropped me a $5 black-pilled Kiwi. The press should have conspired together to only ask Epstein questions at the presser.
Don't sink into the swamp, Artax. Your story has not yet been written.
Oh, hope is unconquerable. Thank you for the 5. I appreciate it. Hope is unconquerable. This is the problem. I don't think that Trump's laid the groundwork for success. Not only because this was haphazardly organized as the Russians even acknowledge, as most of the Russian state press acknowledge, and much of the Russian intelligentsia, as much of those in the American diplomatic community acknowledge, is that this was organized haphazardly, that the fact that we didn't even know if Zelensky was going to be there, or exactly if it was going to be a one-on-one, and it was like changed to a 3-on-3 meeting at the last second, shows just how much they kind of hodgepodge this together, which, I mean, isn't surprising from a man who, you know, used to kind of just roll with it when trying to get these like real estate deals done. Like him rolling with it, I mean, it might work sometimes, but when you're just trying to roll with it and be smooth with it and try to put all this together, but you don't build the groundwork. Not only has Trump not fundamentally made the Russians reassess their position on the battlefield so they don't think they can just keep on going from being the most hopeful from their position of conquests and glory, but also Trump has not done anything to make them consider that he is willing to do more to make them cooperate. You either have to change the conditions on the ground so that they are suitable for peace and the Russians don't want to keep going forward, or think that if we go any further, Trump's response will be so heavy-handed that it will not be worth the price of continuing to push forward. And that's just if you want to freeze the line where it is and start building a framework that stops future invasions, which is, again, something that has not been touched on at all outside of, you know, piffy references to Ukraine security, with no references to security arrangements, defense pacts, or something that where if the Russians invaded again, there would be heavy consequences. I hear things like, well, we have American business investments in in Ukraine, and Russia wouldn't want to bomb that. They did it last time. They bombed Boeing. They bombed all sorts of American companies. Don't know why it would change now with the mineral deal or elsewise. Well, you know, we'll put more sanctions on them, is another thing that I've heard floating around, that could be the penalty for a future Russian invasion. Okay, great. We'll do the same thing we did in 2014. We'll do the same thing we did in 2022. And will these sanctions be stronger than they were in 2022? What will the global geopolitical economic landscape even look like then, the next time the Russians invade, especially with, you know, America's bond market? You know, look, all I'm going to say is that we're rewriting the global economic order in some interesting ways right now. Whether or not those rewrites are going to be permanent or not, I do not know. But what I am saying is that you have a way of whittling down your influence. First-term Trump had more leverage over the Chinese than second-term Trump. First-term Trump had a larger value of trade generally. We were talking about 20% of China's exports was going to the United States. Second-term Trump, we're talking about 13%. That's the difference in leverage. That's the difference in value of the American consumer for the Chinese market. And therefore, offers of tariffs or XYZ, we're not going to have more leverage the second time around. We don't know how things are going to change. We don't. And so when you talk about sanctions next time around, I mean, you can try to make them more powerful than the first time around. But at the end of the day, the Russians were willing to bite the bullet in a lot of these economic consequences. So it's not hard to imagine that they would be willing to do it again. Without hard security guarantees, you're always leaving up the possibility that the Russians are going to invade again. And this is something that wasn't addressed at the presser, just like nothing else was addressed at the presser. It looks like we've made just as much progress as the first 5 phone calls, at least from the outside with the information we have now. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully we learn of some amount of progress, and hopefully we don't find out that Zelensky's being boxed out of the next meeting, or possibly even worse, that he isn't, but he has to go to Moscow, Russia. Any questions, chat? I'm looking around.